So our last lecture for these weeks is on customer data. So you can get some real world feedback on your ideas before you go further into them to see what your peers and others might think of it so that you're removing your team's bias further from the equation. So when collecting customer data, there's a number of ways you can do it. You could do interviews one in person with the customer, over the phone. You could do focus groups where you have small groups of people and you ask them questions or have them test products. You could observe how they interact with their products or your ideas in the form of prototypes. So this is important, like for instance, if you have young children who can't effectively communicate what they're doing, or even if you have something like you're looking at how people use sports products that you create, and you see they're using it in a way that's, ineffective compared to what they're actually stating or claiming about it. And then secondary sources are always great to use too, such as government census data or research articles that, could be relevant with medical data. So to create a survey instrument, you need to determine your survey's purpose. And so for this class, the purpose is to figure out whether they are accepted and excited of your product ideas in terms of what features or what your product might be able to do or what problem it might be able to solve. And so when you develop these questions, you should have remove bias from them. So try to keep it from being negative or positive, keep it neutral. Unambiguous, so use small short words. Try to use non-engineering technical terms if you're not asking engineering people. It should be clear and brief. So 3 categories of questions you might consider: the user's attitude towards your product, so how do they feel about it? Their knowledge, do they know about their problem and what the product is actually doing to solve it? And then behavior, so how would they interact with your product? So this is an example of a customer survey. It uses what's called a Likert scale. So it rates from strongly disagree to strongly agree and neutral in between for each question. This is for a senior capstone course for the basketball return device we talked about in the previous lecture. And so some of these questions: members of my family play basketball at home. This is going to give you an idea about the person. And then questions like members of my family are on basketball teams might give you an idea of their knowledge. Members of my family wish to improve their shooting skills. Gives you an idea of whether free throw shooting is actually something people want to improve or not. Because maybe, they feel good shooting and it's their running skills or defense skills that they would rather improve. And then these are just 10, 11, and 12 are more product-oriented questions. My family has a basketball hoop attached to a building. My family has a freestanding basketball hoop. My family has an adjustable height basketball hoop. And so these are yes or no questions. And additional questions might be the cost. That's not so relevant to you. I think whenever you go forward with your surveys, you need to focus more on product features and ideas rather than so much about the user and their background information with respect to your product. Whenever you evaluate the surveys, you might want to separate the positive answers from the negative answers. So tabulate the numbers of 4s and 5s versus the numbers of 1s and 2s for each survey question. For the assignment we're going to have for you in the interview or for the presentation in the Friday after this Friday, you should try to get 5 questions and then do 15 responses for each question. Here they have 109 people. And you need to get a large number of people so you can get some quantitative trends. One of the things you might want to do in your survey as well, beyond the quantitative questions, is to ask a couple qualitative questions as well, so that you can get more of the user's reasoning about the product and your ideas. How much data is enough? So this chart shows that, your first 1 to 10 people is going to give you a big increase in your knowledge about the product. And as you improve the number of people, you're not really going to get that many different answers. You might want to get more for statistical significance in your statistics for how you analyze the questions. So that's why we're going to go with 15 in the class, because that's also a practical limit, because you'll probably use your classmates to do the interviews. So you have about 20 to 25 people in the class you could interview, so 15 is a reasonable number. So when you're coming up with your questions for your interview, you might want to focus on certain dimensions of the product that might be important to the user. So for instance, the performance, how well it accomplishes a task, the features, what does it have in addition to the primary task that it could also do, reliability, how long will it function, do they want this product to work for 1 year, do they want it to work for one use, durability would be the product life overall. Serviceability would be how easy it is to repair, or if they have to take it to a shop to get it to repair. Conformance is how well it adheres to certain standards. Aesthetics is how the product looks, feels, sounds, tastes, and smells. This is a little bit more subjective and is up to customer responses, a little personal judgment or individual preference. And then perceived quality of the design could be something that you incorporate in your questions as well. So customer requirements can be things that they expect in the product, things that they say they want in the product, or things they want in the product but they don't know how to vocalize. So one of the things that you might want to think about in the product is, could you supply something that somebody needs but didn't even know they needed until they saw your product? And then exciters are things when they get your design, it's one of the things that makes it stand out from the competition. It makes them want to go to the store and buy your product, or go to the field and use your product, as opposed to something that's less exciting from a competitor. And so this chart is called a Kano diagram. There's, if you look at the slides online in the PDF, there's a matrix for how to set up your interview specifically to try and figure out whether product features you're asking about excite people, or are expected or threshold basic, or they have no difference to whether it's in the product or not. But you could still incorporate elements of this in your interviews. And you need to realize that some things that excited people in the past, what used to be excitations in the product, over time become expected features. So for instance, smartphones having a touchscreen used to be really exciting, new technology, but today there's nothing exciting about the touchscreen because every phone has one. And so you'll have time in class to work on these questions. I can also look at your questions specifically before you ask your classmates to make sure you're getting the most out of your interviews, because it can be a bit tricky to make sure you're asking questions that are unbiased and not leading the user to give you the answer you're expecting, but you want to be a little bit indirect so that you can get kind of maybe some more into the subconscious of the user and what they think about their product, rather than what's obvious.